Alrighty, now we are on our slider constraint. Now this one's pretty cool too, and there's a lot of practical uses for this one. So let's go ahead and take a look at a quick example here. So you can see this cube right here is kind of sliding along our x-axis. I'll go ahead and back this up again. And you can see it's somewhat limited right here. And you can see that is how we do this over here. We have our x lower and upper. So let's go ahead and recreate this from scratch. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but we're going to need a couple of objects first. I'm going to go ahead and add a plane so that we have a floor to work with here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and scale that up. I'm going to give that a rigid body type passive. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and add in a cube here. I'm going to scale that down, and we're going to need two cubes. So this one we're going to want to be active. All right, and I'll go ahead and set the weight to like 0.1. We want this to be nice and light. I'm going to go ahead and scale that up a little bit. I'm going to scale our plane up, duplicate our cube. All right, go back to frame 1, of course, when we do that, because otherwise Blender will not know how to calculate our physics. Always go back to frame 1. Now, our second cube, we're going to want that to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to make that 10 kilograms. Let's go ahead and play this to make sure everything's working correctly. Looks like it is. We have everything falling down. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take our floor, lower it down, Shift D to duplicate it, scale it down a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. Something like that should be okay. Let's go ahead and make sure this is working properly, and it is. All right, now that we have our physics working properly, I'm going to go back to frame 1. I'm going to go ahead and add a constraint. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this cube. I'm going to add a rigid body constraint. Now, our rigid body constraint is set to fixed right now. I'm going to switch this over to slider. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and select our first object, which is going to be our cube. And our second object can just be this floor plane right here. Now, if we go ahead and press play, let's just watch what happens. So, do you guys notice what's happening right here? Our cube is still being affected by physics, but it's completely locked to the X location. So, right here, if we click on X-axis limit, we can also limit how far it goes. Right now, it'll just kind of continue off into space. But notice how it can only travel along the x-axis. This is super important because if you wanted to create something like a piston or maybe a slider within a linear rail, you could do so using this technique. Let's go ahead and check x-axis under the linear tab right here, and let's watch what happens now when we press play. Notice how it's completely limited to how far it can go. I'm going to go ahead and raise that limit for the x lower. I raise it to negative 3.7. Now notice how it stops and then it goes back. Pretty interesting, right? So it's limited. So imagine this is some sort of tab slider that can slide in between two objects. And I'm going to go ahead and add two objects so that we can really see this visually here. I'm just going to add a cube, scale it along the x-axis. Now, these aren't going to actually have physics here, but this will further visualize how this works. Notice how you could sort of have a tab where our cube kind of slides in between those tabs. And look, it's still moving because it still has physics to it, but it is limited to how far it can actually go. So if we take a look at how far it went, or did it stop right about there, we can also make one more object here. I'll just go ahead and duplicate this and lock it into place. This is about how far it can go. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like now. I'm going to go ahead and back this up. Again, these aren't physics objects. These are just to visually show you where everything is. I'm going to go ahead and scale that down. All right, so our cube should stop right about there. And it does. And I think this is really interesting to visualize where the cube stops and starts. And if you wanted to, you could create some sort of linear rail system, sort of similar to maybe a 3D printer or a factory assembly line. And I just think this is a really interesting constraint. There's a lot you can do with this. All right, so have fun with this one, guys. The next one that we are going to talk about is our piston constraint.